Welcome back to this explainer. Today we are stepping directly into Dr. Ara's Planar's dissection theater to explore something absolutely wild, the mind-bending biological geometry of a truly two-dimensional being. We're going to examine a specimen from a perfectly flat world, a remarkable creature known as Homo planus, and uncover the astonishing, almost impossible anatomical compromises required for complex life to exist entirely within a single plane.
Okay, part 1. The split body paradox and the evolution of the gut.
To really wrap your head around this, I want you to imagine drawing a continuous line from a mouth to a stomach on a flat piece of paper. In the early evolutionary history of this flat universe, primitive organisms just had a single opening for both eating and waste. But as they evolved for high-efficiency processing, they needed a continuous digestive tract. Well, here's the massive problem. If you draw a straight line right through a 2D plane, the creature would literally divide into two separate drifting halves. The left side of the body would just completely detach from the right. This is what Dr. Planar famously calls the split body paradox.
The evolutionary workaround for this is just brilliant. It's called a sequential interlocking zipper-gut. So rather than a hollow open tube like we have, Homo planus uses 4 discrete chambers separated by massive muscular clamping septa. And these septa are lined with microscopic interlocking protein hooks. Here's how it works. When the creature eats, the oral vestibule receives the food and locks perfectly shut. Then, chamber 1 unzips to receive the food, but crucially, chambers 2, 3, and 4 remain completely zipped tight. Once the food moves down, chamber 1 violently zips and locks its molecular hooks shut before chamber 2 is even allowed to open. It operates exactly like canal locks on a river. This ensures the left and right body halves are always firmly anchored together by at least 2 high-tensile zippers. Their body is literally never completely unzipped.
Now, the energetic tax for this complex mechanical ballet is incredibly high, and it comes with a massive terrifying risk: diastasis. This is what happens if there is even a momentary failure in the synchronization of those zipper valves. If the posterior wastegate opens before the upper abdominal zippers are double locked, it results in a catastrophic internal tear. An autonomic failure here is almost instantly fatal. Because of this, their nervous system literally prioritizes zipper locking above even their own heartbeat.
Moving on to part 2, flow in a flat world, focusing on the circulatory system. Think about your own body for a second. In our 3D world, our blood vessels loop over and under each other all the time, threading around muscles and organs. But on a flat plane, any crossing is a catastrophic collision. If 2 flat vessels tried to cross, one would literally have to crush the other, or they'd merge into a single pool, completely scrambling oxygenated and deoxygenated blood together. To solve this spatial nightmare, their anatomy uses what Dr. Planar calls the peripheral loop. Notice the stark difference in geometry here. Our 3D circulatory system is like a chaotic overlapping forest of vines, but the 2D system? It's a strictly geometric grid. There are absolutely no overpasses. Blood travels up a ventral highway directly to the brain, and then splits to travel down 2 distinct channels, tucked safely on the extreme outer margins of the body. Furthermore, their highly viscous blood travels in laminar, unbroken sheets. There can be no turbulence, no swirling eddies. If the flow becomes turbulent, the shear stress would instantly rupture their delicate, 2-dimensional cell walls.
What is truly fascinating, though, is how the blood actually reaches the internal organs without forming a messy intersecting web. They use structures called comb capillaries. Instead of a net of tiny veins, these delicate vessels branch strictly inward from the outer channels, perfectly parallel, exactly like the teeth of a comb. They deliver oxygen and terminate in one-way osmotic sinuses, while the waste fluid is drawn back out through a completely parallel set of return vessels. They never ever violate the rule of parallel lines. If a single vessel deviates by even a fraction of a degree, it blocks the neighboring pathway.
Respiration requires a similar spatial workaround. In 3 dimensions, our lungs are elastic balloon sacs that expand outward in all directions, right? But in 2 dimensions, a lung cannot expand laterally, or it would just crush the nearby heart and that essential zipper-gut. There's literally no empty space to swell into. So instead, they possess a laminar lung. It expands vertically along the spine, kind of like pulling open a musical accordion. The intercostal muscles slide the dorsal spine plates up and down, drawing air through a dorsal spiracle on their back in a continuous, unidirectional stream through ultra-thin, parallel sheets of tissue.
Let's look at part 3, the uncrossed planar mind and the brain. The whole philosophy of thought is about connection. But how do you connect complex thoughts when your physical nerves absolutely cannot cross paths? The crucial point is this. Just like those blood vessels, if two physical nerve axons crossed in a flat brain, they would physically merge and completely short-circuit the signal.
The brain bypasses this geometrical prison with a stunning threefold approach. First up is laminar segmentation. The brain is arranged in concentric arcs, strictly segregating sensory, motor, and core consciousness signals in their own dedicated lanes. Second, when a signal absolutely must cross a physical barrier, it uses chemical field transmission. This is essentially a biological wireless system where specialized chemicals diffuse across microscopic fluid channels. Only neurons with the exact right receptors pick up the signal, completely bypassing the physical nerves standing in the way. Finally, and this is wild, they use temporal multiplexing. The brain is governed by a 50 Hz pacemaker that slices time into microscopic milliseconds. One pathway might fire on odd milliseconds, while another pathway, sharing the exact same space, fires on even ones.
Dr. Planar summarizes this beautifully. Faced with a flat universe, our biology conquered time to escape the limits of space. It is a deeply poetic observation reminding us how elegantly life adapts, utilizing time-sharing to solve a purely spatial constraint. Oh, and it's also worth noting how they see. Their eye is a single lens with a one-dimensional line of photoreceptors. So they perceive depth by constantly bobbing their heads side to side, allowing those rapid, multiplexing brains to calculate distance based entirely on how fast objects shift against the background. So cool.
Moving on to part 4, telescopic and hydraulic strides.
I want you to visualize trying to swing your leg forward right now. Because we have width, our legs easily swing past each other along a third axis. But in this flat universe, legs have absolutely no width. They exist on the exact same sheet of space. If a 2D being had simple hinged legs like ours, they would crash into each other at the midpoint of every single stride. The mechanical workaround for this is a brilliantly engineered high-pressure hydraulic slide and thrust system. Here is exactly how they take a step. First, they retract the moving leg completely upward, much like the brass tubes of an antique telescope collapsing in on itself, pulling the foot entirely into a hollow pelvic bay inside their silhouette. Second, the entire hip assembly slides forward along a horizontal bone track. Finally, massive pelvic reservoirs pump hydrostatic fluid back into the leg, telescoping it firmly back down to the ground. If they were to ever lose hydraulic pressure, they are instantly paralyzed. Because their world is flat, their joints are also incredibly limited. No ball and socket joints can exist in 2D space because, well, a ball requires a third dimension to rotate. So their joints are strictly sliding pins and simple hinges. Their knees only bend in a single direction, they can't turn their ankles or twist their hips. Because their joints can't rotate into a third dimension, even a simple act like turning 90 degrees becomes this deliberate, rigid, almost mathematical sequence of retracting, pivoting the frame, and re-extending.
Part 5. Birth in 2 dimensions.
Reproduction in an environment where bodies cannot overlap is a serious logistical nightmare. Mating relies on incredibly precise side-by-side lateral alignment and interlocking genetic keys. During pregnancy, the fetus develops in a flat, muscular pocket called the gestation cradle. But because the mother cannot expand outward into a third dimension like human mothers do, she must expand laterally. Her skeletal plates are connected by elastic ligamentous webs, essentially turning her horizontal profile into a wide shield. Finally, the birth itself is a terrifying vertical descent that requires a dangerous, temporary unlocking of the mother's lower pelvic zippers, which instantly snap back shut the very moment the paper-thin infant emerges.
Finally, Part 6, imagining the third dimension and flipping the script. Dr. Planar's apprentice asks what biology might look like in an impossible third dimension, and his response is just brilliant. He points out that a 3D creature wouldn't need a zipper-gut. They could just have a continuous open tube running straight through their center, from mouth to tail. To a fully zipped-up planar being, this sounds absolutely horrifying. It sounds like a structurally unstable, permanent whole. They'd view us as being held together only by the sheer excess of our space.
It is a really profound shift in perspective. While we might look at Homo planus and pity their geometric limitations, viewing them as mathematically restricted shadows locked in a flat canvas, they would look right back at us in absolute horror. They would view our overlapping blood vessels that loop wildly through empty space and our tangled, messy brains as unfathomably chaotic. To them, we are unnecessary, terrifyingly unstable masses lacking any of the elegant spatial economy they've mastered. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought.
If these brilliant two-dimensional beings view us as an impossible, chaotic paradox, what unfathomable biological geometry is looking down at us from the fourth dimension right now? Could our complex 3D bodies just be the primitive, flat shadows of something infinitely more profound?
Please like and subscribe.